following program is intended for mature audiences.
Rudy's Revelation.
You're crazy, man. You're crazy. I like you.
This is all a conspiracy. No, that is a conspiracy.
Hey, everyone, welcome to today's episode. It is February 13th. Thanks for joining me today. We got breaking news coming out of Europe. A terrorist attack in Munich. And Germany's chancellor says he will not accept a dictated peace in Ukraine. We're going to be following those stories and more. Please check out episode 105 of Tuesdays with Perry. We went live last night, discussed a whole list of goings on in the past week or so, past 24 hours, even more so. Got a lot of money coming back to the federal government through Doge. Billions and billions discovered, waste, fraud, and abuse. So let's get into the headlines for today, Thursday, February 13th. We're going to start out with the first. Excuse me, a little miscue there. I'm going to start out with the first story from the BBC. Munich car ramming a suspected attack. Or it's Munich car ramming a suspected attack, say officials, and driver was Afghan asylum seeker. I thought all these guys were vetted. Apparently not. What we're reporting is a 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker drove at a group of people in Munich, police say, injuring at least 28. Officers are presently treating the incident as a suspected attack. The suspect was known to police for theft and drug offenses. Police say the car accelerated before hitting a trade union rally. An officer fired one shot at the suspect before he was arrested. So another car ramming attack, much like we saw in New Orleans. How this is going to affect other things going on in Europe, including the talk by the chancellor of not accepting a peace deal in Ukraine. Next headline up is from One American News. Hegseth, Ukrainian entry into NATO is not realistic amid peace talks. This is true. Harry and I discussed this last night. But from France 24, Scholz rejects dictated peace for Ukraine as Europe reels after Trump-Putin call. Chancellor Olaf Scholz on Thursday said a deal to end the Ukraine war should not be imposed on Kiev as European leaders warned of the security implications on the continent after U.S. President Donald Trump agreed to open negotiations with Russian President Vladimir Putin in a phone call. So they don't want peace. This is the point of NATO, and Perry and I discussed this last night. NATO not changing their mission statement, which basically states that the purpose of NATO is to undermine and to check the Russian state. And this is long after communism fell in the Soviet Union in 1991. Fox News is reporting Doge subcommittee holds first hearing slamming $36 trillion national debt as House Republicans declare war on waste. Doge subcommittee Witness said Biden Medicaid rule let states wait as long as 13 years to verify whether illegal immigrants are receiving benefits. That's state and or federal benefits. Just the News is reporting Doge slashes billions, but allies in Congress eye an exponential expansion of savings. The key is what's going to be done with the money. And this happened during the Clinton administration when they again also slashed spending, which put the budget back in the black. But then a lot of that went on to go to different types of waste, mostly in the Pentagon. It was basically what happened in the Clinton administration was the peace dividend from after the Soviet Union fell. The United States was able to claw back some defense spending. And since that's the largest expenditure, that helped the budget out immensely. So I imagine when Doge gets to the Pentagon, there's going to be some discovery there as well. Going back to the Just the News article, the Trump-created Doge has put Washington careerists in a tizzy by highlighting billions in dubious spendings or outright fraud across multiple agencies, notably the United States Agency for International Development, that's USAID. Though Doge originally touted plans to cut up to $2 trillion in federal spending by eliminating waste, in its efforts so far, admittedly just weeks in, have yielded smaller savings. We're going to get to the rest of that in just a minute. Now, they scaled back since the campaign trail, they scaled back their estimates, and now they're saying they could save as much as $1 trillion. $1 trillion is a lot of money. $1 trillion is 1,000 billion. And each billion is 1,000 million. And $1 million is still a lot of money. Any waste, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, is still significant. Fox News reports Doge boasts dozens of contract cancellations on Wednesday, totaling over $150 million in savings. Doge also announced its website keeping track of government spending and contract cancellations is now live. So with the claims that they weren't being transparent, and then Caroline Leavitt comes out and go, yes, we're being transparent, you could just look on the website. So the website is now live, and it's tracking exactly what Doge is doing. The National Review is reporting witness at first Doge hearing, and this is the subcommittee hearing, confronts lawmakers with scale of COVID fraud. They stole $1 trillion. Now, this is something I had said previously because it's pretty well documented at this point, is that they borrowed way too much money for the COVID relief. The Biden administration did. A lot of that money went unspent. And at least $1 trillion could have been written off as fraud. CNBC is reporting Elon Musk for the U.S. government to delete entire agencies, remove the roots of the weed. Elon Musk is going not just after line items, but agencies as well. Once they total out a certain amount of spending that can't be justified, he's recommending get rid of the whole agency because the agency is part of the problem. It's not just the staff there, it's the whole culture within the agency. So what we do understand now is that certain departments, including the Department of Education, although it has congressional funding, as long as you care for the funding, the agency can be removed because the agency, and a lot of these agencies, were put in by executive order so they could be removed just in the same way. Zero Hedge is reporting Doge insider Joe Lonsdale, Deep State has finally met their match with Elon Musk. So Palantir co-founder and billionaire venture capitalist Joe Lonsdale believes that the entrenched U.S. government bureaucracy has finally met its match. He said the Doge and Elon Musk, is going to be a hard match or a difficult match for the bureaucracy to undertake, because Joe Lonsdale is also assisting with Doge from the outside, and he made these comments on CNBC in an interview there. Next headline up from the National Review. Stay with me now. DHS, that's the Department of Homeland Security, claws back $59 million FEMA sent to New York City hotels to shelter illegal immigrants. So what we have found out here is, with all the humming and hawing about, oh, these weren't disaster relief grant funds, they were FEMA funds. But as I mentioned yesterday, why would the citizenry be okay with money that is allocated, not strictly, but understood as allocated for disaster relief, for natural disasters, being used to house illegal migrants that were let into the country by the last administration? This is not a free ride for anybody who comes here, that we should take care of them, because you're sending the wrong signal to people that want to come here abroad with no money in their pocket and no sponsor, that the federal government, or the state governments for that matter, are not responsible for your care. So if you're coming here with nothing, then you have nothing. And as fortunate as that sounds, maybe they should have kept the money they had and not pay it to the coyotes and for their long trek to the United States. Maybe they should have kept it and used that money for something else. I'm not saying people shouldn't be able to come here. In my honest opinion, I think there should be a moratorium for 1 year on all immigration. But aside from that, I do think we should increase and streamline the ability for people to come here legally. But I also think there should be some criteria. Other big news from PJ Media: Lee Zeldin, who has been confirmed as the director of the EPA, just discovered $20 billion laundered by the Biden administration. That's a big number. We'll see if this story really pans out. Just the News is reporting Linda McMahon, resident of my state of Connecticut, to face Senate confirmation hearing for Education Secretary on Thursday. So she's not even out of committee yet. These are still hearings. So RFK Jr., I guess the vote is going to take place in about 15 minutes at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time today, Thursday the 13th. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed. We're going to say our prayers, and hopefully this will be a new day, a new dawning on the health of the American landscape, of the American citizen, identifying what the real culprits are of illness. People just don't come down with illness. There's a causality involved, whether it's autism or diabetes. People just don't come down with diabetes. People just don't come down with cancer. A lot of these diseases have root causes that have to be identified if anybody would ever want to get rid of the disease itself. It's always about a cure. Let's find a cure. Let's find a cure. How about we just don't have the disease? I mean, there's so many epidemics going on here and so many allergies now that as soon as children grow up, they start having maladies. All right, let's move on to the Federalist. Stay with me now. Senate confirms Tulsi Gabbard as Trump's Director of National Intelligence. Thank God for that. Harry and I talked about this at length yesterday or last night is that the fact that the Director of National Intelligence had concern about the fate of Edward Snowden, who blew the whistle. Edward Snowden, if you look at him as a traitor, okay, whatever, he might have violated his oath, but he was a whistleblower in the fact that he let the American people know that the intelligence agencies that had no order or mandate to spy on the American people were doing exactly just that. And he laid it out with internal documents. He didn't disclose anything that put people at risk. All he did is show the programs that were involved, and some of them were old, that had been going on since the Patriot Act was passed after the 9/11 attacks in 2001, that the NSA and other intelligence agencies, including military intelligence, were scooping up data on America. And as James Clapper said, that he didn't think it was wittingly, we're not doing it wittingly, it's by accident. That's not true. The FBI, the NSA, Department of Homeland Security, even the CIA, do not follow the laws protecting the privacy and individual liberties of the American citizen. And that's why we're all here. Next story up is from The Hill. This is an opinion piece by J.T. Young. Whoops, I got to go back to this one. Sorry. Washington Examiner, Democrats against democracy. Democrats are anything but democratic. This is absolutely true because for the simple reason is they like the democratic process because they can cheat. That's the only reason they're Democrats. They're liberals because they like to spend other people's money because that gives them an opportunity to take some. It's called a skim. They're not Democrats. They're liberals or progressives. I've been saying that for some time. All right, now let's go to The Hill. In this opinion piece by J.T. Young, the headline reads, Democrats should expect to keep losing in 2026 and beyond, as Perry and I stated last night. But also The Hill says the views expressed by contributors are their own and are not the view of The Hill. Of course, The Hill which is also a captured news outlet, The Hill would never report Democrats should expect to keep losing in 2026. Of course they wouldn't. Ever. They're there to prop up the establishment, which for some time now has been the Democratic Party. Or the establishment, there's part, the Rhino Republicans, a part of the Republican Party that has perpetuated the status quo, the violation of civil liberties, individual liberties of the American people, the fleecing of the American taxpayer dollar. All this has gone on by both parties for some time, and now it's being put to an end. So everybody who resists are complicit. Back to the Federalist. Trump and Vance aren't defying the Constitution, they're following it. Getting into the lead here, it says in the Constitution, the president is invested with certain important political powers, in the exercise of which he is to use his own discretion. He is accountable only to his country in his political character and to his own conscience. So I just want to go into this briefly in this wording. He is accountable only to his country in his political character. Well, what does that mean? That means that only his political future, which means if he does things in office that the electorate doesn't like, they could vote him out of office. It doesn't mean that rogue judicial appointees can side with their cronies and limit the chief executive's power. His choices cannot be questioned in court, and then back to the quote, because the subjects are political. They respect the nation, not individual rights, and being entrusted to the executive, the decision of the executive is conclusive. The president, like no other politician, has the ability to make unilateral choices that he was elected to do within the confines of the checks and balances. So unlike Joe Biden just can't forgive student loans outside of Congress where those loans were granted. And as I stated before, you want to claw back money that was appropriated, you might be able to do so. But that doesn't protect the organizations that were doling out the cash. You might have to award, in the end, you might have to award the cash anyway because Congress appropriated it. But be sure that future outlays will not happen. The article goes on to say, who penned these outrageous words? Democrats and many pundits might answer Vice President J.D. Vance over the weekend. Vance provoked an onslaught of criticism for suggesting the federal district judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. And that is indeed true. They are checks and balances, but in state courts or federal courts within states, if the state's rights are not being violated, then no. It is the discretion of the executive and the American people where federal dollars go. That's why most of the appropriations are passed through Congress. Post Millennial is reporting Trump administration investigating Minnesota, California schools for divine order barring biological males from women's sports. The Minnesota State High School League and the California Interscholastic Federation are free to engage in all the meaningless virtue signaling they want. At the end of the day, they must abide by federal law. These are executive orders, which are indeed law. This will probably be fought out in the courts. It'll go to the Supreme Court, and Trump will be found to be the legitimate executor of those laws. Post Millennial also reports the judge who demanded Trump administration restore web pages on gender ideology presided over a case of January 6er who committed suicide while waiting for sentencing. 37-year-old Matthew Perna committed suicide in March of 2022 while he was awaiting sentencing. What a shame. Or was he killed? Hard to say. In any case, a lot of these activist judges who should recuse themselves are specifically put there and want to preside over cases where they have a political stake or a personal stake. You look at Mershon, Judge Mershon, his daughter worked for the Democratic Party and was paid millions of dollars by the Democratic Party. And he still presided over the supposed hush money case on Donald Trump, which any legal scholar will tell you that those charges were ridiculous. Newsweek is reporting Republicans reveal Trump tax plan will cost U.S. $4.5 trillion. Well, we'll see. They go on to write, Republicans are divided on how to move forward with Trump's policies during the ongoing budget reconciliation process. Some favor a single comprehensive bill that includes much of Trump's agenda as possible, while others prefer two separate bills that would deliver incremental victories for the president. House Republicans are at odds over uniting around a comprehensive legislative package that covers border security, energy policy, and tax measures. The Freedom Caucus's move to introduce its own tax plan has further deepened divisions, complicating efforts to advance the proposed backed by the House Ways and Means Chair Jason Smith, a Republican of Missouri. All right, so the thing about two bills is it'll move faster. I've always been an advocate, like Thomas Massey, of why not make 100 little bills? Because it's harder to shove pork in there if you're voting on one specific policy. But that's why they bundle bills, is so they can shove shit in there. So let's say you want, I don't know, no tax on tips. Somebody else is going to shove legislation in there that's going to say, black lesbian women get a federal stipend of $3,000 per month or whatever. Make up whatever kind of crazy legislation you want, and you could shove it in there. So the people that want no tax on tips would have to vote for this other ridiculous shit. And that's why people say, you're not a Republican if you want the line item veto, because there was a proposal in legislation where you could take out shit you didn't want. And I think that's the way it should be, or you should vote on separate one item in every bill. Wall Street Journal is reporting Senate expected to vote today on Kennedy's nomination as health secretary, happening in a couple minutes. Vaccine critic is poised to be confirmed and pursue his agenda of fighting chronic disease while implementing administration cost cuts. We'll have to see. Basically, they're going to let Doge in there and they're going to figure it out. What they are going to find is more spending, more blank checks written for nefarious purpose. So he's poised to be confirmed, but the Wall Street Journal says to pursue his agenda of fighting chronic disease. Let's hope so. It's better to fight chronic disease than to treat, or prevent chronic disease than to treat chronic disease. It's cheaper. And the onus is on the person. So if you want to be healthy and drink green tea and take vitamins and things, that onus is on you and the cost is on you. But if you get sick, then the cost is deferred onto the nation. One American News is reporting Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt defends decision to ban AP News over Gulf of America defiance. Do you know what this is? So let's just get into the article. So silly. I mean, the thing is you can report however you want to report. But it's the AP, which is also captured, is openly just defiant. They kind of do what they want to do. It was like when I was in journalism, you had to follow the AP style book, and they would capitalize B when you're talking about black people, but if you're talking about white people, that doesn't have to be capitalized. Not that I care, but it seemed like a stupid thing to do. But in any case, let's get to this story. The White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt defended blocking the Associated Press from the Oval Office briefing room after the outlet refused to follow President Trump's executive order of renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Earlier this month, AP News also admitted that they have been paid $37.5 million by other U.S. government agencies since 2008. So that's a while. That's 18 years. Was that $2 million a year? $2 million a year. That's what Politico was being paid, $2 million a year. Leading to the questions revolving around whether or not government propaganda has been previously pushed onto AP readers. Of course it has. And it's not. Right. It's not government propaganda. Corporate fascist propaganda. The government can do things private corporations can't do. Private corporations can do things governments can't do. But they work in tandem. So the fact is it government propaganda? It's more likely corporate propaganda because corporations run the government for all intents and purpose. The U.S. government has long been an AP customer through both Democratic and Republican establishment administrations. It licenses AP nonpartisan journalism, just like thousands of news outlets and customers around the world, stated AP spokeswoman Lauren Easton. Well, I need to go through this propaganda statement. Why is the AP government, why is the U.S. government AP customer? It's like individuals read news, and they should pay for their own news outlets. And AP, for the most part, is free anyway. Through both Democrat and Republican administrations, the establishment, it licenses AP nonpartisan journalism. That's not true. If you would consider the establishment a political party, then it certainly would be partisan, because that's what it protects. If you look at the way the corporate structure is, that's a whole reason corporations are the way they are. Just like thousands of news outlets and customers around the world, that's not accurate. Established news organizations are owned by corporations who are putting out narratives that support corporate fascism. And they go on to say, we reserve the right to decide who gets to go into the Oval Office, Levitt told the press on Wednesday after being questioned about the decision to ban the Associated Press from joining the pool of reporters on Tuesday by CNN's Caitlin Collins. All right. Well, let me just go into this here. It's always been the discretion of the administration to decide who gets to ask questions and who gets into the Oval Office briefing room. That's always been the case. That shouldn't be surprising. So people that are antagonistic toward the administration, and I don't mean antagonistic like asking real questions or pointed questions. I'm talking about people like Acosta. What was his name? Jim Acosta? Is it Jim? That would go in there and berate the president even when the president told him to shut up and sit down. That's no decorum. So if the president says you should report it as the Gulf of Mexico, and you could do it however you want. You could have a caveat in there when you write it. The Gulf of America, still mostly known globally as the Gulf of Mexico or whatever. To defy the president is just making a point that you're partisan. Isn't it? It is. One American News is also reporting that the Department of Justice and Pam Bondi sue New York Governor Hochul and Attorney General Letitia James over sanctuary policies. Well, we went over this last night with Perry about exactly what this is around motor voter. So New York wants to let non-citizens vote in municipal and state elections. However, there's no way to determine that they won't vote in federal elections. And the standard line is it's against the law. Well, that doesn't mean people won't do things that are against the law. There's no procedure in place to weed those people out of federal elections. You're registered to vote, you're registered to vote. There's no you're registered to vote only in these elections, and if you show up, you're not going to be on the list. I think they do have that in Arizona, but not in other places. But also the point is ICE is getting into the motor voter data to search for illegal aliens. And when the IT people see the federal government snooping around there, and if they know what targets are there, they will go and warn the illegal aliens that ICE is coming for them. So that's a subversion of federal law. Treasonous, perhaps, but it is a crime. So what they're doing now is they're just suing them to stop it. But there could be arrests, certainly. All right, Just the News is reporting White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt blasts reporters for dishonest narrative. And she just goes on to say many of the outlets in this room have been fear-mongering the American people into believing that there's a constitutional crisis taking place at the White House, Leavitt said. And we went over that. There isn't a constitutional crisis. The executive has the right to do what he's doing. So whether states can try to battle that, sure, it's a federalist system. And they may have luck trying to battle things that are going on in their state as state sovereignty exists. However, federal judges in states, right, can't all of a sudden put an injunction on something that the president of the United States wants to do. It's ridiculous. The story also goes on to say, or quote Carolyn Leavitt as saying, in fact, the real constitutional crisis is taking place within our judicial branch, where district court judges in liberal cities and districts across the country are abusing their power to unilaterally block President Trump's basic executive power. All right, we got more news about Russia. Reuters is reporting that Trump says he backs Ukraine, but early concessions to Russia spark concerns, only to capture news outlets like Reuters. Everyone knows the issue is NATO. To have foreign policy gurus out there saying that NATO has nothing to do with Russia's invasion of Ukraine is just blatantly false. Everybody knows that that's the reason. The reason was not Vladimir Putin wanting to reconstitute the Soviet Union. That's not the reason. It was just unmotivated, or just for the reason of I am attacking because I can attack, or I really want the Donbass because it's such fertile area. None of this is true. It all has to revolve around strategic assets in the Black Sea, where the Crimea Peninsula into the Black Sea protects. So strategically, Russia could never allow NATO to take control of Crimea, or to have troops or missiles there or whatever, or have a hostile power in Crimea because of the strategic needs of Russia, which have to be accepted. Then there will never be peace. So Russia wanted a buffer zone. That was a whole reason for the invasion. It wasn't to take over entire Ukraine. It was to create the buffer zone and give them land access to Crimea and to protect it strategically. Reuters goes on to say, President Donald Trump has promised a swift end to the Ukraine war, but with talks about to begin, Some things have complicated his task by sacrificing leverage. This isn't true. Trump, who took office on January 20th, separately discussed the war on Wednesday with President Vladimir Putin of Russia and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And talks about the phone call. He said U.S. troops would not be part of any security presence in Russia. I'm not going to go into the whole. Because of the way they talk about, Pete Hegseth came out and said, NATO, Ukrainian membership in NATO is a non-starter, which it is. That's the whole point of the invasion in the first place, because Russia knew that if Ukraine was going to join NATO, that they needed that buffer zone, and that's why they created it. So giving up concessions is not, it was part of the prisoner exchange that recently happened also, is that Putin wants reassurance that the United States, not the West, but the United States is serious about the security concerns of Russia. And if you want peace, you have to take that into account. New York Post, Trump suggests very bloody Russia-Ukraine war could be nearing its end after great talks with both countries. Yeah, it has to end. Like he said, it's a stupid war that should have never began, never have begun. And it wouldn't have happened if he were president. This is absolutely true. The fact is the NATO's mission has to change. NATO and the expansion of NATO states moving eastward had to be stopped at some point. And as far as Russia was concerned, they claim they protested each additional country when they went into the Caucasus, and they said Ukraine was the last straw. So it's metaphorically poking the bear. And it's tempting nuclear destruction. Why would you do that? For what? Because you want Russia's minerals? One American News is reporting Democratic lawmakers reintroduce slavery reparations bill. Ayanna Pressley, of course, the black bald woman, and a member of the far-left congressional group known as the Squad, and Senator Cory Booker are leading the charge to reintroduce H.R. 40, also known as the Commission to Study and Develop Reparations Proposals for African Americans Act. No. How about no? I thought we had settled this. We settled this when we created the African state of Liberia. That's where all freed Africans could go, and you could jump on the Black Star lines created by Marcus Garvey, and you could go to Liberia. You'd be free. Or you could have taken part in the westward expansion of the United States and be given 40 acres and a mule. And if you have proof that your ancestors tried to do that and were denied, then I would say you would have a case. But just handing out millions of dollars to anybody who's black, I don't agree. There have been plenty of a lot of wrongs that have been committed on the American people of all races. What about people that have been paralyzed by mandated vaccines? Or not even mandated. Tribune News Service, Worcester, Massachusetts, becoming transgender sanctuary city after public compares Trump administration to Nazis. You might have seen this on the TV or on videos on the internet, where all these crazy trans people went up in front of the commission to say that they're scared. The reason they're scared is because the mainstream media keeps saying that Republicans are attacking transgender people. And they meant politically. But the people that read the stories don't see that. They go, we're being attacked. No one's attacking you. And that's a shame. I liked Worcester. If you've ever been to the town, it's got some cool seaside areas and beaches. But I won't be going there anytime soon. If I want that kind of environment, I'd go to Provincetown. New York Post is reporting New York school board meeting descends into chaos over LGBTQIA plus book as large group of fuming parents take over. Outraged upstate New York parents took over a school board meeting this week, demanding to know why their elementary school children, and this is the point here, it's elementary school children. This is not when they were talking about book banning. You're banning books. My brother was like, they're banning Catcher in the Rye in Florida. It's not what it is. They're taking this kind of sexually overt material out of elementary school, where people are, children are under the age of 10. And who's putting these books into the curriculum or into the library? It's called grooming. So, demanding to know why their elementary school children were exposed to LGBTQIA plus book that included depictions of naked people and bondage enthusiasts. All right, it didn't show explicit acts, but it showed naked people and bondage enthusiasts. Why would you show that to children? A large and animated crowd of parents gathered in a Monroe County auditorium on Tuesday and voiced their concerns to the superintendent and Penfield school board members about their young children having access to the book, The Rainbow Parade, a celebration of LGBTQIA plus identities and allies, including, obviously, bondage enthusiasts. So the problem is, I don't have any problems with lesbians or gay or bisexuals or even trans people. When you start to get into queer just means you have any sexual perversion. Next article up. One American News, J.D. Vance's distant relative denied heart transplant because she's unvaccinated, parents say. Cincinnati Children's Hospital denied her a transplant even after religious beliefs. As a non-denominational Christian, they were still denied because the girl didn't take the COVID-19 vaccine or the flu vaccine. I can't believe that hospitals, cities, states are still conducting this or still having still prohibiting transplants on the basis of vaccination status. I thought we had put all this shit behind us. Trump should get on this. And I have to thank Trump again. I talked about it yesterday. Thank you, Trump, at least in advance, for bringing back incandescent light bulbs. Next article up is from the Post Millennial. Colorado BLM activist who shot disabled veteran in the head, released from prison early after sweetheart deal. James Edward Marshall IV, 33 of Alamosa, shot disabled veteran Danny Pruitt at a BLM protest in Colorado 2020. What the fuck? Why? Why? People are just crazy. Because the whole thing is like all our alternative lifestyle is being attacked. You're free to do whatever you want to do, and if I protest it, I have that right. I shouldn't be shot in the head. Next article up, also from the Post-Millennial, ICE Eero Seattle arrests El Salvadoran fugitive hitman wanted for homicide. He was able to obtain a Washington State driver's license despite his status as a wanted fugitive. So he's an Interpol, or he's a transnational criminal. So we have a working relationship with El Salvador. So people that are wanted in El Salvador and that are thought to be in the United States, their names, identities, information have been shared with the FBI and ICE. The story goes on to say, ICE Eero Seattle arrested El Salvadoran hitman who was wanted for a fugitive in his home country. Jose Marin Lozano, 47, of El Salvador, was captured in Seattle on Tuesday and will remain in ICE custody pending removal from the United States. He was wanted for aggravated homicide, accused of allegedly kidnapping and killing a civilian in 2018 while working as a police officer. Federal law enforcement sources confirmed to the Post-Millennial that he is a documented member of a police gang that exterminated targets. Many of his team of hired killers have been convicted and sentenced to prison in El Salvador. Good to know. All right, couple minutes left. The Telegraph. Disney ditches trigger warnings in DEI bonfire. Entertainment giant removes disclaimers on beloved classics in major shift. So if you didn't see when you watched shit like The Jungle Book, it would have this disclaimer, hey, some of the depictions here might be seen as insensitive or offensive. Don't watch it. It's like, has anybody seen the movie The Hateful Eight? It's a Quentin Tarantino Western. It's really good, but the abundant use of the N-word could be jarring for some. That movie didn't have a disclaimer. All right, One American News again. U.S. inflation surges to 3% in January, slashing hopes of interest rate cuts. Well, which is bad for growth initially, but we have to be careful with inflation. Like I said, there was so much spending that did not spur productivity that it's still out there, and that the specter of inflation still exists. And because it ticked up 1/10 of a point in January, that is no reflection on Trump, who only took office 10 days before the end of the month. What could he have possibly done in 10 days that would have stopped inflation? Like I said, the money was still out there. He hasn't spent any money yet. So I can't say he hasn't spent any money, but I think it's going to work itself out. But I made the right call. I knew we're still. Let's go into the story. U.S. consumer prices came in higher than expected in January as inflation showed few signs of slowing down. That's not true. It's been up and down 1/10 of a point for the past year. The consumer price index rose 0.5% last month, which is an increase from December's 0.4% growth, according to the report of the Bureau of Labor Statistics on Wednesday. Additionally, in the 12 months through January, the CPI increased 3%, which is up from 2.9%. It's 1/10 of a point. Meanwhile, economists had expected only 3.3% of monthly increases and 2.9% year-over-year growth. Inflation, that's still high. Core prices, which excludes volatile food and energy prices, grew by 0.4% in January from the month before, also rising more than expected. The core figure came in at 3.3 year-over-year, which is above fact set expectations of 3.1. Well, it's not, we're still in a difficult financial situation. That's why the irresponsible spending of the Democrats on pie in the sky projects, silly Green New Deal crap, among other things, was not only unwarranted, but extremely risky. So keep your shirt on, you know, let's not worry too much. We got to wait and see. Some of this clawbacks will help. Spending will help. All the things that Trump wants to do are meant to spur economic activity, but the Fed is not going to not going to lower rates until the specter of inflation is gone. So I told Trump this a month ago, you're going to have to spur the economy without the Fed's help at first. Once you get GDP numbers up, the risk of inflation will go down and the Fed might assist you. National Review reports temporary cash transfers are poor stimulus tool. This is for the Biden administration because what we're seeing here is when you transfer cash, you just give cash to people, a lot of times they sit on it, particularly if you're giving it to people who are flush. Because you send out these monies and some people need it and they'll spend it right away, but other people will just stick it in the bank. So they've always been a poor stimulus tool because it doesn't really spur growth, the kind of growth you need to turn the economy around. And that is the growth in the business sector, where people need to borrow money, start businesses, and expand sales, whatever it is they're selling. Across all four cases that were studied, the pattern is clear. Cash transfers raised household income, but they did not meaningfully raise consumption or GDP. Just what I said. The finding contradicts claims that such transfers are effective counter-cyclical tool. They are not. Giving people money doesn't spur the economy. I think our last story here, One American News, heroic Tennessee security guard prevents mass shooting in a nightclub after swiftly returning fire. Tennessee security guard prevented a potential mass shooting by returning fire with a rifle. The shooting took place on January 26th around 2 a.m. outside the Dream nightclub in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Gunman ran up to the crowd and began firing off rounds. Security guard who was outside with a rifle, and if you look at the video, it's interesting, shot back. An armed society is a polite society. So this isn't a mass shooting like Carnage Seeker, like what happened in Maine or whatnot, and in other places. This seems to be gang related, and there was an incident at this club a few weeks prior where there was a shooting inside the club. And so this is obviously connected to that, retaliation for that. And since that prior shooting, now the security guards in Tennessee at this nightclub were wearing body armor and carrying ARs. So that is, if the sight of that isn't a deterrent, the actions of that security guard were. All right, thanks for joining me today. Rudy's Revelation. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Live stream on Rumble. Check out my other website, libpop.org. Learn about libertarian populism. Check me out on other social media, X, Facebook, Get Our Minds, True Social, Substack. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great rest of the day. Stay hip to the trick. Respect.
You're crazy, man.
This is all a conspiracy. Don't you know that it's a conspiracy?
The New World Order.
right. I'm an American. I have rights.
You can't handle the truth.